Right, I make this film after having organised my guide to Illimani, and I feel super happy that I've done that. Oh, that's a cool llama thing in the floor, because like organising the logistics for me is half battle. Like having Asperger's syndrome, I want everything to kind of be perfect. I need the guide to be able to speak English, I need him to be a nice guy, and I met him and he seems really nice. He's someone I could spend 3 days with. So he's picking me up in the morning from my Airbnb and then taking me off and up to Mount Illimani. It's going to be a super challenge, but I feel so happy knowing that I've got someone that I can trust. He's like arranging me a cooking tent. It's like, whoa. Didn't realise I was needing that much food, but they know more than me about these mountains, so...
Well, it's funny looking back at this. I was so optimistic about having found this guide, and well, let's just say I had a cooking tent, alright, but there wasn't any bloody food. And there was another major reason as well as to why it was a bit of a disaster, but I'll reveal that in the video.
Illimani, the grand dame or dame of the Andes Mountains.
So this is the back of the taxi, which I thought would be a 4x4, but it turned out to be a Toyota Corolla Estate. And I was really impressed with how well it handled the terrible roads and the inclines.
Here is Illimani from another angle. So I think we're going to Pinaya, which is over there. And then we hike up to somewhere around there.
We got back in the car after about 5 minutes of just enjoying this view, and I started to become more and more nervous as we drove onwards. Would I manage to make the climb? Would my intrusive thoughts get the better of me if I didn't make it? Soon it all just became about conquering the mountain or meeting the mountain at the top. And we got to Pinaya, which was out of shot of that point of the video I just showed you. And we sat waiting for what seemed like ages. I had to pay a national park fee and then waited again for about half an hour for someone to open the gate. And the road got progressively worse after that gate, to the point where the driver of the taxi had to sort of back up and then floor it to clear some of the steeper inclines in the road. This was so terrifying. My intrusive thoughts about beating myself up if I quit the mountain were actually then joined with intrusive thoughts about would I die in this Toyota Corolla. So we set off after a very unappetizing and unfilling chicken dinner. However, my fuel was my determination, and we followed the path which led up to like a nice switchback track, which in turn led up to the base of the ridge of one of the mountains and the ridge that we would be climbing up. And I was finding the climb very enjoyable, but also very, very hard. And our kitchen tent was kind of being raced up ahead of us on the back of a guy called Pedro, who was the porter that my guide had hired. And I sort of felt like a real neo-colonialist, you know. It was like, God, what the hell am I doing? you know. But I thought it'd be the best way to get up the mountain. So, and it was affordable for me. So I carried on the climb, you know, really feeling the tiredness and feeling the altitude, and then wondering where the base camp was. You know, it seemed we were going up very, very high. I checked my altimeter, 5,000 meters. Didn't seem like the base camp was that high. And after all the videos I'd watched, it sort of was supposed to be about 4,000 something, 4,100, I think. And it turned out when we got to the camp with its phenomenal views, we'd reached the Nido de Condores, or the Condor's Nest. And I immediately recognised it alongside the monument to fallen climbers. So it gave me a very uneasy feeling, you know. I'd really pushed myself inadvertently. And was I going to make it the next day? Would my legs would I have the energy? After all, it was sunset and I had to be up by 11:30 that evening to start the summit climb, according to the guide. So there I was, in this heavenly place with this heavenly view, feeling extreme anxiety because I started to really doubt whether or not I'd make the summit the next day and hereby waste all of this time and money.
And I'm currently standing at 5,502 meters, and then tomorrow this is the route. Super steep. This is why I've got a guide, and I'm super happy I've got a guide. It's just the best thing I could have done. And he's a really nice guy as well. He reminds me of my granddad a bit.
Yeah, sorry, Grandad. I was wrong there. I mean, he wasn't a horrible guy, but I wouldn't say I would feel confident he would rescue me if I was in a sink or swim situation either, which is not how you should feel about a mountain guide.
We made it to Condor's Nest. So here's my trusty tent, which has been with me now for 6 years, and I've used for over 300 nights. Came with me on my cycle around the world trip.
All right, enough about the bloody tent. At this point, I was actually bursting for the toilet. And not to put a too fine a point on it, I spotted what looked like a good spot. And the guide instantly shouted at me not to go there because it was too dangerous. And so he actually directed me towards the Monument of Fallen Climbers, which I didn't really feel appropriate, considering, there was a slim chance I could have joined it. And it's also pretty damn disrespectful. But so I decided to hold it in. And so I was very uncomfortable downstairs as well as in the mind while enjoying this tremendous view.
Oh wow, this planet is just stunning. It's just absolutely stunning. There's Huayna Potosi over there. I think that's the mountain I was going to climb over there. The mysterious Mururata is actually behind this very mysterious looking face as well. Looks like some wet tissue paper falling down a mountain. So that's where we're headed tomorrow, the summit.
All of the anxieties and worries I had were trying to wrestle this gorgeous view from my attention, and there was a war of attrition in my mind, but I knew I was going to win.
Highest sunset I've ever seen. Would you look at that? Unbelievable. I'm so happy right now. Right, I need to find a flat rock for the stove. There's lots of rocks here, let's check.
So this was the highest and grimmest dinner I'd ever eaten, and it turned out it was actually my own food. The guide had brought the bread and not much else, as it turned out. So the cooking tent was kind of all a bit for show. It wasn't really needed because we hardly had any food. It was basically using the scraps of food that I'd brought from my Mururata climb. And there was massive confusion because the guide asked me during the trip planning in Saganaga Street if I'd had any gas. And I said I had a little bit of gas left, but it was only for emergencies. And he said to me, oh, I can bring gas. And now at 5,468 meters above sea level with bare rations, I had no gas. The only gas we had was the little bit that was in my pot. So I was just thinking, I hope to God that not only do we have to melt the snow, we've got to heat the water up to have some soup. And by the grace of God, we had enough gas to heat up the water, make some soup, and also melt some ice for some water in the morning. But it was only enough for about a cup full of water. So that had to be rationed. And the guide had brought some mango mixed with what I can only think was whiskey or something, mango juice. Very bizarre. I think he was just running on fumes. I mean, it was impressive. He said he was 49 years old, and he'd been doing this for years, so I guess he was used to it. But I didn't find it impressive. I was scared shitless, to be honest. Now I really was doubting myself whether I could make the mountain with a guide, which was kind of a bit of a pathetic situation to be in, to be honest. I mean, it goes to show that money can't guarantee anything in life, so I guess there was that. But now I really thought that I was starting this climb on the back foot. I actually felt less prepared than I did going up bloody Mururata. So that didn't do wonders for my confidence whatsoever. And I couldn't even sleep that night. I was so cold, curled up into a fetal position, and I could hear the cracking of thunder in the far distance, which turned out to be avalanches, which was very, very, very unnerving. The whole campsite kind of turned into a really sinister place in a very short amount of time. So this is my first attempt at animation on iMovie, so please go easy on me. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to the climb, where I left that morning in such a grim state of mind. It was unbelievable, because if you have any doubts when mountaineering, most of the time you won't make it. So I had to really change my state of mind quickly. I followed my guide and I started to meditate to the sound of our footsteps, and I ignored the yawning blackness around us. I just focused on the footsteps and putting one foot in front of the other, until we got to a yawning chasm which lay across our route, and in fact it was across the entire face of that side of the mountain, and a small snow bridge led across. And my brain, of course, decided to take that opportunity to remind me of how much larger I was than my guide. So if I slipped and fell, no matter how good he was at self-arresting, we both would have gone over into the crevasse, or the wide gaping canyon. Anyway, we kept on climbing and it got ever steeper. Apparently it's 55 degrees steepness at this point, but it didn't feel it. I was kind of in good spirits. I started to, enjoy the climb. The views around us started opening up. It was like the perfect present, slowly unwrapping itself, until we got to a point at 6,200 meters where I rested, and I took off the glove to look at the altitude, and of course it blew out of my hand, and my guide exclaimed that I'd lost his clothes. So therein, as if I'd thrown his jacket over the mountain on purpose. I felt a bit sorry for him, because he was kind enough to lend me his glove, considering my good old trek mates, which have served me well in the Scottish Highlands, were absolutely no good in minus 15 degrees as it was at this height. Eventually got to the ridge, and the ridge just went on and on and on. I started to really doubt again whether I'd make the top. It's like, how high is this thing? I thought, we'd be right at the top now, but it just, went off into the distance. And I wish I'd took photographs or videos, but I was too focused on getting to the summit. I was too focused on the goal. I wasn't enjoying the journey, and I should have been spending more time on the journey. So when we got to the summit, it was a real point of I felt elated. I was just, words can't describe my emotions, and I conquered all my demons. I conquered all my intrusive thoughts, and there I stood on the top of this frozen flame of Mount Illimani. So please take a moment to enjoy the following video, which I'm so happy I made despite the frigid temperatures.
So here I am on the summit of Illimani. La Paz is down there. Wow, okay.
So it all felt a bit of a blur, heading back along that ridge and retracing our steps. And I could not believe how much we climbed in the dark. It's always the case with mountaineering. It sort of always feels longer heading back to camp. And I was just reflecting on my achievements for the entire journey. I felt like I'd kind of almost achieved the lifetime goal without even realising it. I didn't realise how important summiting Illimani was to me, because it's such a majestic mountain, the most beautiful I've ever seen. And here I'd reached the top. I'd met it at the top. It was just me and a guide, and I truly felt unstoppable, and it actually felt weirdly easier than Mururata, mostly because I was guided. And that's in a way why climbing grades don't really matter, or well, for me anyway, because Mururata is apparently an F, which is facile or easy in the French adjectival scale, and Illimani is apparently AD, so as a difficile or fairly difficult. Forgive my French pronunciation, terrible, I know. And I think it's, climbing grades, they're there for a reason, but I think for me, Mururata might as well have been an AD, purely because it was a battle of the mind. My intrusive thoughts and my demons are always telling me I'm a failure, and that is just not true. I battle through these thoughts every single day, and I think that's why I enjoy mountaineering so much, is because it's such a physical goal is much easier than thinking about how much money you're going to earn or what job you're going to apply for. It's a point on the earth that you need to reach, and there's a certain physical path to take to get there, and the problem solving is very mechanical. But with Mururata, it was a constant battle of the mind. My demons are telling me I'm a failure, but I slaughtered them. I'm no failure. I managed to do it solo, and it was my first ever time crossing a glacier well over 5,000 meters above sea level. What demon can do that? At the end of the day, maybe that's why the demons are so aggressive, is because they're never right. They're the failures.
Successfully summited Illimani with my guide, Miguel. After a long descent, we come back to base camp, or high camp.
So there you go, I did it. Despite having a guide who couldn't figure out water or gas, I summited Illimani, and I did it in 2 days as opposed to 4. And despite the fact the guide made me pay for his chicken and chips dinner on the way back to La Paz, I don't have any bad feeling towards him, because he was excellent on the mountain. So if there's a small chance that my guide watches this video, in future, never assume that your client is providing gas, and always bring water. Because after this climb, I drank 2-litre bottles of water in one go. I still can't believe I managed to make Illimani in just 2 days with just half a cup of water and a bottle of cocaína, which is Bolivia's Coca-Cola. So a couple of big takeaways from this trip are: A, never assume that the guide will be carrying the essentials, e.g. gas and water. Bring some of your own. And B, it's better to have more than just 2 people on the mountain. It makes for a more secure rope party. So ideally you'd have 3 attached to the rope instead of just 2. I sound like a real fool saying this, but I'll go ahead. I'm not sure how to add a subscribe button, so just please press the like button. It would mean a lot. I appreciate that, and I hope you enjoyed this video. There'll be more to come.